Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. In early February of 1355, the otherwise peaceful city of Oxford was disturbed by the bell of the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin. The university bell wasn't ringing to announce a celebration or chime of the hour, but instead it beckoned out to the students at the university. It was a war bell, chiming to tell them that it was time to strike the citizens. The bell rang to call students to arms during the murderous city riots of the 14th century. I know what you're thinking. Oxford may seem like a quaint academic city, one which bubbles with genteel academic rigour. But its history contains murderous plagues of violence, which destroyed centuries-old abbeys and monasteries, the deaths of students who murdered one another, and an internalised war that saw public execution of bishops at the stake. No, this isn't a spin-off of a Donna Tartt novel, but the bloody scholarly history is quite befitting of a dark academia campus novel. By the early 14th century, Oxford was one of the most significant centres of learning in Europe. The city had a population of around 7,000 inhabitants and perhaps 1,500 students. However, its academic prestige and bookish population certainly didn't bring about peace. In late medieval England, Oxford was the murder capital of the country. The students and the townsfolk did not get on, and the former were known to be lethally violent. Throughout the 1200s, there were repeated outbreaks of violence in which citizens and students maimed and killed one another. It got so bad that many scholars fled the town to join others at Cambridge University instead, who had a far more peaceful reputation. But before I give you all the gruesome details of the history of Oxford and its murderous students, let us take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, which is Squarespace. As you know, I've built all my main business websites over the past few years with Squarespace. I mean, over a decade we're going back, because I love how intuitive and easy it makes website design and layout. I don't know anything about coding, it's really not for me, in all honesty, which is why using other website platforms has been really frustrating, because you just want to move something and it just blows the whole thing out of proportion. But with Squarespace, it's so easy. I just simply drag and drop my content where I want it. And if you're a creator like me who wants to expand your revenue stream, so I want to do my own courses and also my own shop, I can do it all from Squarespace, because Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that makes it so easy for you to monetize all of your content and expertise in a way that fits you and your brand. There's a members area that lets you sell courses or classes to followers. So if you're a fitness instructor or you're an artist who wants to teach people how to, I don't know, sew, knit, whatever, you can do that from Squarespace. And Squarespace has an inbuilt email campaign option where you can collect email subscribers and convert them into loyal customers, all from your website. You don't have to have multiple different sites that you have to go to. And you have a built-in analytics feature, which is so insightful into who's visiting your site, the traffic sources, the time they spend there, the most read contents, and the audience geography, and just everything you need. So if you want to expand your business or just build a beautiful site for your blogging leisure, then go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/lady of the library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So, the team behind Medieval Murder Maps, I know, fantastic. It's a digital resource that plots crime scenes based on translated investigations from around 700-year coroner inquests. And they estimate that per capita, the homicide rate at Oxford was around 4 to 5 times higher than late medieval London or York. I mean, we're talking about London. It was higher than them. The homicide rates at Oxford at this time are estimated to be around 60 to 75 per 100,000, which is some 50 times higher than the current rates in 21st century English cities. Among Oxford perpetrators with a known background, 75% were identified by the coroner as clericus, and 72% of all Oxford homicide victims were also clericus. Now, during this period, clericus is most likely referring to a student or a member of early university life. So, students fought with one another a lot for many different reasons. Some cases reveal rifts among scholars from different parts of the British Isles. Back in the day, student lodgings were often arranged according to students' homes' regions, and friction between Northerners and Southerners, or the Irish and the Welsh and the English, were pretty common, and also they were kind of bundled up together rather than intermingling. So quite a gruesome fight took place on a Thursday night in 1298. An argument between students in an Oxford High Street tavern resulted in a mass street brawl with swords and battle axes. Needless to say, there were deaths. The coroner recorded that a student named John Burrell had a, quote, mortal wound on the crown of his head 6 inches long and in depth reaching to the brain. In the winter of 1296, a whole gang of students killed a single student called David de Chouempty after he brought back a harlot named Christiana of Worcester back to their school. But the students were never punished for his murder, or for the ridiculous reasons. In spring of 1303, a student called Adam de Sarum was playing with a ball in the street when he was suddenly jumped upon by a trio of Irish scholars who stabbed him in the face and the throat. Just a month earlier, 2 Welsh scholars had assaulted some passing students who raised a hue. A student at Durham University attempted to intervene with the fight, but he was sadly beaten to death. For those unfamiliar, raising a hue is a term used for when witnesses to crimes would shout or cry out to bring attraction to the crime, because before modern-day policing, witnesses actually had the legal responsibility to alert the community to a crime. But of course, the problem with that was most people who raised a hue were often killed by the criminal as a result of raising a hue. Students didn't just turn on each other, but locals and women in the community, particularly sex workers. An unknown scholar murdered Marguerite de Hereford in the parish of St. Aldate in 1299. You see, instead of paying her for intercourse, he stabbed her to death, fled the scene, and was never brought to justice because no one ever found out who it was. And it wasn't as though the police or law and order were any safer from students. Richard Overhey, a preserver of the King's Peace, was brutally attacked by 4 Oxford students with swords, bucklers and other arms during the summer's night of 1324, and he was found dead at his home. So you're probably wondering, how did students get away with so much murder? They're not getting imprisoned, they're not getting punished, they are staying there. Well, it's because they were highly protected. You see, you won't be surprised to learn that actually in the 13th century, less than 10% of murderers were actually ever executed. And since many of the students at Oxford University were clerics, they knew their chances of being executed or severely punished were even slimmer than that. Though can we explain why the students at the time were so violent? Well, at this point in time, the age group for most university students were between the ages of 14 and 21, an age group most prone to committing homicide or violence, regardless of the century or region being studied. The students were also living far away from home and their family, and whilst they were theoretically, meant to be studying, like most students, they were out drinking, cavorting with prostitutes, okay, maybe not so common now, and also fighting with one another. And away from home, without any parental supervision, they found it exceptionally easy to get their hands on weapons. Scholar Ruth Mazur-Carras looked at the status of men versus their status as clergy, and she found that the threat of clerical celibacy combined with heterosexual sexual aggression fostered violence as the clerical norm of their peer group. Sexual aggression was a form of resistance to the clerical model and also eased the students into their new celibate role. Because the clerical status reduced their masculinity, the violence between students and other townsmen reinforced that masculinity. And many older clergy regarded their days as a student violence as simply the folly of youth. Interestingly, though, I have given an example of a murder of a prostitute at the hands of a student. Carras discovered that at Oxford, women were rarely the target of student aggression. Larson found only 1 charge of rape in the late 13th century, and only 1 record of a woman being killed. Obviously, though, rape is woefully unreported anyway, but you get the gist. In 1261, a few scholars were accused of wounding women. In 1297, a serving woman named Matilda attempted to intervene in a burglary, but she was struck over the head and was killed. Out of all the records, there was only 1 rape and 6 murdered women, and that was all that was ever uncovered. Obviously, this could be a part of a lack of coverage, but when it comes to the murders, it's quite interesting. Barbara Hannawalt found that actually in the medieval period in the 13th century, only 18% of the murder victims were women, and these were usually always women killed by their husbands, not by some random attack students. See, this is because there were relatively few serving women in student residences, because obviously they're clerics and having a woman around was not permitted, so there were fewer potential targets. And it was also because students at the time had very easy access to prostitutes and could easily obtain their services and afford them, so students didn't really find it necessary to attack them, unless in the case where one didn't have the money to pay. But what about the bell of the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin that chimed to announce the battle cry for students? Well, that occurred on what is now known as the St. Scholastica's Day Riot. On Tuesday the 10th of February, between 1354 and 5, some students and priests were out drinking in Swindlestock Tavern on the southwest corner of Carfax, and they were complaining about the quality of the wine. The landlord of that tavern was John of Barford, or de Bareford, who just so happened to also be the mayor of Oxford at the time, and it's alleged that he responded to their claim with stubborn and saucy language, whereupon a student threw a quart pot at his head. Locals came to the mayor's aid, and he had the bell of the city church, St. Martin's of Carfax, rung to summon the townsmen to arms. But then the university retaliated by rousing its students with the fray with the bell of the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin on the High Street. The battle commenced, and both townsmen and students employed knives, swords, and bows and arrows. It was rather bloody, and the next day the mayor rode to Woodstock to ask the king for support, but news had already spread about the riots. Approximately 2,000 men came in from around the county to help the townsfolk of Oxford, crying as they advanced, "Slay, slay, havoc, havoc, smite fast, give God knocks." These rioters broke into academic halls and started killing scholars, and this continued until Thursday. In all, 62 scholars were killed. After the riots, the mayor of Barford was imprisoned in the Tower of London, and a writ was issued by Edward III on the 6th of May 1355 to the citizens to elect a new mayor. The king also sought to punish the rioters for the students' deaths with an annual ritual humiliation that lasted 500 years. Obviously, he wasn't alive the whole time, but the king saw that for every Scholastica's Day, the mayor and the bailiffs had to attend a mass for the souls of the dead and to swear an annual oath to observe the university's privileges. Together with 62 citizens representing the number of murdered scholars, the mayor and the bailiffs would march to the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin, where the vice-chancellor of the university awaited them along with the vicar of St. Mary of Virgin Church and the proctors and the university registrar. The bailiffs then had to hand over 63 pence, usually in small silver coins. And that's all about the violence of medieval Oxford University. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any requests for any other small history stories, please leave them down below. I have a Google Docs form that you can use in the description box, and you can also please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. It really helps out, and any comments I really appreciate. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to all of my patrons for making this possible and for Squarespace, and I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.